From the previous sessions, you have a sense of what LAMS are and how they were developed as part of the RethinkAction platform. Now, let's see how we can use it to explore LAMS more in detail using the interactive online catalog. Just to refresh your memory on the platform, after logging in, and now I will do it, you can log in whether as a citizen, policymaker, or researcher. You will find three main tools: the LAMS Catalogue, the local analysis, and the European and global analysis. Let's focus on the LAMS Catalogue. You will see a flower-like visual. Yellow dots represent LAMS, light blue dots indicate the primary sector involved. You can filter LAMS using several parameters. The sector, so you can browse the tool and just identify the sector that for you it's interesting, or you can enter a keyword. For example, solar. And lastly, you can use the synergies and trade-offs filter. Here you can select the type of impact or resource that you want to focus on. For example, impact on greenhouse gas emission and a positive impact, so a reduction in emissions, and the filter will show the LAMS that can provide that type of impact. Finally, you can also use the recommended LAMS filter, where you can indicate the sectors you're interested in. You can select your main objectives, and you can also rank your selection criteria. Then the system will show the most relevant solution based on your preferences. But when you click on a LAMS, you can visualize the main information in the right panel. Now I will look for a specific LAMS. I'm looking for a solution that has to do with solar panels, and in particular, I would like to explore the solution dealing with solar panels installation in rooftops buildings. So when you click on a solution, you visualize the main information in the right panel here, including LAMS description, the LAMS scale, the type of solution, the scope, and the LAMS contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. Then you can download a fact sheet that contains more detailed information on that LAMS. In this case, let's explore solar panels in rooftops buildings to see what type of information can be retrieved from the fact sheet and how this information can be interpreted. In the first page of the fact sheet, we find the general description and characterization of the solution. We can learn that the type of solution is spatial planning. So it has to do with how land is used. In this case, what we can learn from the benefits section here is that this solution can lead to less consumption of land, as it can generate power and change the role buildings from energy consumers to prosumers. So it has to do with spatial planning in the sense that it reduces the need to convert land for solar energy production. Then we know that it deals with the energy sector and buildings. We have a definition of the solution, and we also have information on the scope and the potential. In this case, it has a Primarily, it has a mitigation scope and it has a large mitigation potential. It is a supply measure in the sense that it deals with the supply of energy and not with the consumption of energy. And then we have a list of actors involved in the implementation of this measure. In the second page, we can see the co-benefits and possible negative effects. In a previous session, we learned how the impacts and resources of the LAMS were assessed. So this was based on an expert evaluation, adopting a European perspective with a medium-term time frame. What we assessed was whether the solution had positive to negative impacts on a range of items, including greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, well-being, job creation. And then we also assessed the resources needed for the implementation of the solution, spanning from a high amount of resources needed to no resources needed. Also in this case, including several items like water, land, public engagement, private investments, and more. And then we also identified the contribution of the solution to specific sustainable development goals. And we find a list here in the fact sheet. Then a full page is dedicated to drivers and barriers. Drivers and barriers were identified through a literature review. So all the references can be found in the table. Drivers and barriers include several categories. They include institutional and legal factors, financial investment factor, economic and market factors, socio-cultural, technical, and organizational and governance factors. When no information was available, then the relative boxes are empty. And then lastly, you can find all the references, including the policy documents where the solution was retrieved from. That also gives an idea of the scale. In this case, this solution was not retrieved from a policy document, but it was a result of the consultation with stakeholders. And based on the consultation, we also know that it is a solution that is relevant at the local scale, but that also has big implications at the European and global level. And then you find a list of scientific articles that were used for the analysis of this solution. If we look for another one from a different sector, what we learned is that forests play a very important role for climate change adaptation and mitigation. So let's try to look for afforestation. I want to learn better. I want to learn what happens with afforestation. So here we found our LAMS, reforestation, afforestation. Again, in the right panel, we can see the general information. And then we can download the fact sheet. In the fact sheet, we find more detailed information. So in this case, we're talking again about spatial planning. The land use is forestry, and the policy sectors involved are forestry and biodiversity and ecosystems. Then we have the definitions. Reforestation and afforestation are not exactly the same thing, but they play a very similar role, and that's why they were analyzed together. Then we can see that afforestation and reforestation have both a large adaptation and mitigation potential. And this is interesting, again, in highlighting how many LAMS have synergies between adaptation and mitigation. We can learn that forest restoration can increase soil organic carbon stocks, that they offer co-benefits in terms of increased resilience to climate change and enhanced conservation of biodiversity hotspots. We can also learn that it can threaten livelihoods and local access to land if subsistence agriculture is targeted. Afforestation can also increase soil organic carbon stocks, as well as addressing land degradation and desertification. So, a list of benefits, but we also try to highlight some potential issues there. Then again, an assessment of the co-benefits and possible negative effects, and a contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. In this case, we can see that reforestation and afforestation have a positive impact on greenhouse gas emissions, carbon storage, water quality, so mostly positive effects, in some cases neutral or no impact, but generally positive. And the resources needed for the implementation of this measure are water, land, time, labor, so some resources are needed. Drivers and barriers, again, a list based on literature review of scientific articles. Just looking at some drivers could be the land abandonment. So if land is not used for other purposes, then it's easier that it can be converted to forest. And when it comes to barriers, low awareness and low participation could be obstacles to the implementation of these measures. And then again, a list of references. In this case, these solutions were identified in many policy documents, highlighting the very high relevance of this solution across all scales. So, to wrap up this module, you've learned what LAMS are and how they are categorized. You know how a comprehensive stakeholder-informed catalog of 62 solutions was developed, and you've seen how to navigate and use the RethinkAction platform to explore LAMS that are tailored to your priorities. Thank you for your attention.